Hey everyone, welcome back to Once Listed Bourbon Reviews, and today, episode 91, we're going to throw it way back to Jim Beam. Jim Beam White Label. Good old straight Kentucky bourbon from Jim Beam. I think this one will be fun. I haven't had Jim Beam in quite some time, and I think honestly everyone who is, went through college or like the military or just, high school and they had whiskey or Jim Beam, I think everyone can segue back to a story that, albeit somebody got their ass beat, ended up in jail, almost went to jail, made a questionable decision. And I think everyone, well, we'll say most people will have, they could tie it back to maybe a bottle of Jim Beam. That's where the night started, was with Jim Beam. So I personally haven't had Jim Beam quite some time. I think honestly it was at Marshall Trace's wedding, and I was doing mind erasers with Jack, and the well whiskey was Jim Beam. And so that was longer than 7 years ago, but again, I can't really recall a time to where I was like, yeah, like a bottle of Jim Beam just sounds like a good idea. I think anytime you purchase a bottle of Jim Beam, you're just kind of telling yourself good luck. But enough about that. Jim Beam, so this base product has a ton of options. So I was honestly between this one or Jim Beam Black. I think it's kind of stronger. I think it's 86 proof. This is 80 proof. But I figured it'd be fun just to kind of do the baseline model, like the OG again. I think, the other offerings that Jim Beam has, we talk about Beam Suntory, we talk about Little Book, Booker's, Baker's, Knob Creek. So Jim Beam does like great shit. And there's a lot of Jim Beam products that I truly like. And I'm very vocal about, some stuff that comes from Beam Suntory, but yeah, so we're talking about OG Beam. I had to pour it in the Glencairn because it was in a plastic bottle. I just wasn't sure how it was going to shake out. It doesn't have a cork. It was a twist off and smelled like Jim Beam. Congratulations. But with that, kind of let it air out just a little bit. I think just maybe some of the plastic bottlings. But I think, before kind of getting the price point and what I graded as, I think with Jim Beam, and unfortunately because it's considered a bottom shelfer, we'll say an inferior product within the bourbon world with the base Jim Beam. But I think inherently because there's so many good products that are from Beam Suntory, I don't think it gets quite a fair shake. And me personally, because I've had it when I was younger, it was cheap. It was easy to get between that and Jack Daniels. So I think I always kind of leaned towards Beam because it was a little bit sweeter than Old Number 7. But yeah, so the mash bill on this, it's a 4-year, 77% corn, 13% rye, 10% malted barley. Your very typical run-of-the-mill mash bill. With the color, it looks like a 4-year bourbon. Nice hay color. Again, coming out the nose, it doesn't really have a whole lot going on. And for 80 proof, it does have some nice smell to it, but again, nothing's really kind of jumping out in terms of the ethanol content, which is great. So I was kind of afraid that it would smell cheap or smell shitty, and it would kind of throw it off. But you get some caramel, some vanilla. It does kind of like that Jim Beam, like that nuttiness, like that toasted, like brittle or peanut smell profile to that. So, but I think there's just not really a whole lot going on with it. So, so it's enough really about the nose. We'll go ahead and jump to the taste, and we'll give it a grade, and we'll move on. Okay. So, pleasant surprise, I think. Taste, sweet, Does match the nose. It does kind of have that Jim Beam, that kind of toasted nut taste to it. Caramel, a little bit of vanilla. It is sweet. Palate, it's not great, but it's not bad. It's very basic, and I think it's probably the reason why this is a rail or a well pour. I wouldn't advise, I think I went to a wedding, they had this as like an old fashioned, and it fucking tasted terrible, and I should have just got it neat. I think this is very palatable. But yeah, so we'll get to the price point. So price point for this was $1.50. So the price point is a 10. I think the Glencairn glass, which I drank it out of, was actually more expensive than the booze itself. Taste, I would give this, I'm not going to be disrespectful to 5.5, but I'd say this is a 6. So overall, I think this is a 6.5. Very solid, very all around. We'll pay homage to the OG. So I appreciate it, guys.